UX. My name is Jonathan Berger. I work with a company called Pivotal Labs, and I'm kind of curious about who's here tonight, so I wanted to do a quick show of hands. How many people in here, primary role is a designer? Can you give that maybe a third? Developer? Jorge? Okay, a smattering. Product people? Not too many. What am I missing? Entrepreneurs? Show of hands. Okay, did I miss any other big ones? Okay, good enough. So anyway, I'm Jonathan Berger, that's where you can find me on the internet. I studied philosophy, and then I ended up in design, and now I do a lot of development. This has been a kind of organic path for me. And what brought me to Agile, what kind of brought me here, was working as a freelance developer out of school. I ended up on a project called Spot.us, which is a crowdfunded journalism project. This is, I don't know, maybe 2007, 2008. So I spent the summer designing this very kind of can everyone hear me now? Can everyone hear me before? Should I repeat everything? No? Okay. So I was working on Spots, and I spent the summer with my partner designing this product in a pretty traditional waterfalling kind of way. We thought we knew what we wanted to build. We didn't really talk to anybody, which was, I think, okay for this project because it was new. Oh, I'm sorry, by the way, time, is somebody going to give me a wave when I have a couple minutes? So we were working on Spots, and we spent the summer kind of falling in love with this product. It was really our baby. And at the end of the summer, the principal, this guy David, who had won a grant from the 90s Foundation, he went down to Florida to a Agile team, a company called HashRocket, and I was pissed because I'd spent the summer birthing this beautiful baby, and these idiot, mean, nasty developers were going to come, and they were just going to screw it up. So I went down to Florida because I needed to defend this, I needed to back David up, and I went in a very kind of hostile frame of mind, and lo and behold, these guys were awesome. They were smart, and they were smarter than I was. They had a same process for managing work and talking to clients and figuring out what you had to do next. It was called Agile, and I was completely in the tank for it. So I was in Florida for a week on this project. I came back to New York, and I certainly didn't want to move to Florida. So I had to figure out somebody in New York who was doing this kind of work, and happily I did. And my project, when I came to Pivotal, was to bring these things that I'd seen for developers in the Agile methodology, to bring them to design. So some of the things that really, really blew me away were enshrined in these techniques like test-driven development and pair programming. I'll talk a little bit more about these later, but I had kind of seen the light and wanted to bring it back. So here I am. I kind of found the opportunity to be able to do that, which is great. I've transitioned to a little bit of a developer role, so I'm definitely getting my share of Agile. I think the journey to bringing Agile to design is certainly not all the way completed yet. So one of the things I'm kind of excited for this group and for this ongoing conversation is to kind of push that conversation along. So the topic now, right? What is Lean UX? We got to give us a nice introduction about Lean. I think this notion that it's combining customer development and Agile development is kind of Eric's kind of key insight, and it's a good one, and I think it really sums up a lot of it. This think, make, check, which we also call build, measure, learn, and I'm kind of interested in the denominational divisions between that language. Think, make, check. I've heard it, I think, first from Janice in the Luxor context, but it seems like that's coming from the design side. Build, measure, something is the kind of business side, and Lean coming from this notion of reducing waste. So Agile, on the other hand, right, really came from and is embodied in the Agile Manifesto. Who has seen this before? Okay, cool, wow. Many people have not. So the Agile Manifesto was written by, I don't know, a handful of developers a handful of years ago, maybe a dozen years ago. They're coming out of the extreme programming, the XP movement. And there's a little more to it, but this is really the gut of it. And this resonates deeply with developers, deeply with a lot of people who I think want to work in a more humanist fashion. And it really spoke to me. So when I talk about bringing Agile to design, these principles are kind of what I'm looking for, right? Individuals and interactions. Working software doesn't exactly apply to design, but I think this conversation that we're having about getting out of the deliverables business and talking not about the documentation, but for whatever phase in the project you're in, what piece of design thinking, what artifact you need to communicate it is appropriate there and no more. Customer collaboration is obviously a big piece of it, and I think there are problems endemic to design and design education that I hope we as a community address. and responding to change over following a plan. And in my experience, this has always been the absolute motivating factor in what my life as a designer has been, right? You build this beautiful thing, you think it's great, and the client doesn't like it, or reality doesn't like it, and you need to adapt. So, I don't really know, I'm not interested in the difference, I'm sorry. But I think the conversation is important, and the names aren't really, I mean, words are powerful, but Agile is, Agile UX never really, to me at least, took off. It's not a term that really resonates with people. On the contrary, lean is something that, as someone was saying earlier, is the new hotness. Everybody wants a piece of it. It's selling out events like this. So we've definitely, as a community, even if you take for granted they're the same thing, I'm not saying they are for argument's sake, if they were the same thing, at this point in time, the world is ready for it in a way that it wasn't a couple of years ago when Agile was the hot thing and stuff. What I have seen and that I'm really encouraged by is that thanks to Luxor, Josh, and Janice and those guys, and Jeff's getting a Political's business book, Anders is writing a book, but we're clearly at a point in time and a place where some of the stuff is resonating. People are starting to recognize that design is a high leverage activity and it belongs in startups, and that the difference between a Mint and a Wasabi or between a lot of products can be design. So I think we're really seeing a renaissance right now, which is nice. So this is what I'm really kind of excited to talk about. Like, what do we need the world to look like in order for lean UX to be a kind of weapons-grade approach to solving problems? And I have a few ideas about it. So they mostly fall into the category of what did I see in the agile development world that we're lacking in the design world that I think there are ways that we can pull over and bring over. And I haven't seen a ton of work done on this kind of stuff. So I'm hopeful that this is something that people will be excited about and try to implement and push in their own lives. So automated testing, design pairing, shared ownership of code. Okay, so design pairing. So this is kind of following our think, make, check cycle, right? Who here has ever paired? Okay, so that's not too many people. Pairing is a development technique where you take two mice and two keyboards, plug them into one computer, and instead of kind of walking to work in the morning, putting on your headphones, trying not to watch too much YouTube, you find yourself in a conversation all day with another person about what you're doing. If you're test driving, then you can have one person write the test, the next guy makes a pass, and he writes the next test. So there's a nice division of labor. And Cooper Design out of California, they've done a lot of design pairing, and they've kind of, in the design context, synthesized these, extracted these roles or abstracted these roles into a synthesizer and a generator. So they'll have, I think, two designers at a whiteboard, one of whom will be kind of doing the dirty work, and the other of whom will kind of be the co-pilot, steps back a little bit, looks at it in the more strategic context. Design is just, pairing is a fantastic technique, and it leads to, I'm not going to read this laundry list, but in my life, it has made work more fun and healthier and better, and I think it's something that the design world would greatly benefit from. There are a few obstacles to getting there, right? Like, we are, as designers, there's this kind of cult of the rock star designer where, somebody kind of goes into their design cave and they design a bunch of stuff and they come back and everybody loves them. And that's not healthy. It doesn't reflect real work. It's not a scalable model. I think it's really, really insidious and bad, and I hope we can get away from it. Another problem, I think pairing faces this in development as well, is it's perceived as expensive, right? It turns out that when it comes to code, it's more expensive to maintain code than to build it. So if you can assure that the quality going in is higher, you're going to save costs in the long run, and that's why it makes sense to put two people on the job that had previously been done by one. Making that sale in the design context, I think, is something that we need to demonstrate. We need a bunch of success stories, and Cooper is leading the way here, but we need a bunch of success stories in the field of real people, real studios, going out, selling their client on this, pairing and delivering work in a manner that lets us kind of prop this up and make it an ongoing technique. Design is very culturally generous towards collaboration, and there's certain domains in which we're very comfortable as designers collaborating. We like to think of ourselves as sharing and creative and exquisite corpse. There's all sorts of things that go deeply back into design history, but I think that we need to do a better job of putting that forward, explicitly calling it what it is in the design pairing context and selling it and making it a part. Talk about pairing in the cross-functional context. So a designer pairing with a developer can be a very effective technique. You can skip whole iterations of mockups just by having somebody who can implement sitting next to somebody who can visually kind of direct what the page needs to look like. And it's a great technique. It's not something everyone can do all the time. I don't think anyone can do it all the time, but it can be really, really effective. Functional pairing is kind of jargon that I made up, as opposed to cross-functional pairing, right? Putting two designers on a whiteboard together, or my dream is two designers, two mice, two keyboards, one copy of Illustrator, and moving with that. And our design tools are fragmented. We use Illustrator and Acture and Balsamic and Photoshop, and there may be a little more work to do to kind of get us into a place where we can do that. But if freaking developers can figure out their text editor choice doesn't play nice, we can certainly figure out what it goes. So the make piece of it, right? Getting out of the building. So read Jeff's book, buy Jeff's book, and then read Jeff's book. It's very important to do it in that order. We've also started at Pivotal playing around with this notion of style guide-driven development. So we will. This is I'll tell a little bit about how am I doing on time. 5 minutes left? Okay, thanks. So, we found ourselves on a very large project. And over time, an enormous team, and over time, the design had just kind of drifted a little bit. And we found ourselves with, 3 different login forms and 4 different alert boxes and all these different duplicative styles that didn't make any sense. They didn't help the user. They took away from consistency. It was a mess. So in order to fix it, the first step, we made a style guide. It was just, styleguide.html. And it was just HTML that had every possible element on the page. And then you could see them all next to each other. The live CSS would style. So you just saw everything. And people could start having meetings and start saying, well, we've got 3 alert boxes. Are they meaningful? Do they deliver different semantic value? And do we want to keep it? Do we need like the holy crap high alert? Somebody's going to die if this. I'm not kidding. This is a social network for social workers. So if this foster kid, if their parent just got out of jail, like people can die. This is scary stuff, and it's exciting as designers to be able to work on something that's that meaningful. But it's also like shit. You better get it right. So. We were able to look at all this duplicated work and start to extract the elements that made sense, implement them, and get rid of the rest of it. And then, a couple months later, lo and behold, we've got beautiful consistency across the site, and the product team had this amazing ability now to just go to the whiteboard, roughly sketch something and say, okay, use the kid's gonna die alert box here, use the regular alert box and something else. They didn't have to mock things up. They could do it all in wireframes on whiteboards. So obviously, things start moving a lot faster. And the really, really cool thing, the part that I love about it the most, is that now the developers, for the first time, how many people practice Agile or have practiced Agile development, something, been involved in the Agile process? Okay, not everybody, cool. So generally, the process that I'm familiar with, at least, is we put together stories and developers execute them, and then the product owner does acceptance on it, right? It says that this implementation matches the story as the story was described. We go from there, cool. So for the first time, developers can reject stories. When you have style guide-driven development, the developers can say, look, what you're asking for doesn't exist right now. So let's spend the energy, let's do it right, let's build this element. And now when you ask for it, from now on you get it for free, but we recognize that. And that, I think, almost more than anything else, cut down on the amount of inconsistency that just comes from large-scale or, honestly, sloppy design. Sometimes there's just too many hands at work and you can't keep everything straight and the margins are off, or something that takes away from that visual system. And if you're designing a app, it's different than if you're designing a publication, right? The publication at the very end of the day, or the promotional website for a movie, whatever, you can do that final pass and you're frozen in time. But if it's an app that's constantly evolving, these things, these moments of polish, you don't always get a chance to do it. So, what do we have? We had Think, Make, Check. So check automated design testing is something I would be really, really excited to get. I think there are a few different real avenues for this, and honestly, I'm not totally sure why we need it. I think it's a really sexy toy, and I think we really owe it to ourselves as a community to play around with this stuff. So the first one, using image shifts to find regressions. Anyone here practice front-end development? Okay, not many people are raising their hands. For those of you who don't know, the words Internet Explorer will make some of your colleagues cry. Like, bad things happen. And sometimes there are unintended bad things. Sometimes it's just these weird edge cases on some weird page that somebody created because they lost their password and blah, blah, blah. So finding these things, if you could render out your whole site, screenshot every one of them, and then overlay them to see if there's any differences, to see if you've got some weird selector that's doing something nasty, this could be interesting, right? So it doesn't replace human eyes, right? It just directs it 2 minutes, okay? But this would give us the ability to, in the same way that a development team will have a CI monitor on the wall, they'll know if their suite is red or green, they'll know if their newest feature has broken the app or not. We can start to have a notion of the design is broken or the design is fixed, right? Our visual system is intact, or our visual system has been molested somehow, and we need to go in there and fix it. So that's one thing that could be automated. Another thing that could be automated, the New York Public Library created a tool called Infomaki, which, has anybody heard of it? Awesome. So Infomaki helps automate certain types of user testing. It basically does a good job of kind of saying, oh, do you have time for one question? You know, would you like to help the library and answer one question? Would you like another? Would you like another? And it turns out that they get people who are just hooked in for one question to answer 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it's done in a deployable limited fashion. So you can start to bring the technical aspects of user testing into your app in a way that you can deploy, in a way that you can iterate on. That, to me, is deeply exciting. Obi Fernandez had a post, okay, 1 minute. Obi Fernandez had a post a little while ago called Business Driven Development saying saying that, you know, we're doing acceptance testing, but what really matters is not the spec being followed or the story being written. What matters is business value. So let us, you know, only do acceptance once some KPI, some business metric is being satisfied. And doing this, putting this together with Infomaki, I think would be a powerful way to introduce real metrics and real KPI into design, which I think is something that would really, really help us. So finally, it can allow refactoring, which means you've got everything working, you know it's good, now you can make it more elegant, now you can make it clearer, you can dry as a concept we talked about in computer science, do not repeat yourself. So these are all goodnesses that come out of testing, so problems with clean UX. I'm out of time, so I'm not really going to talk about these. You guys can read them very quickly. And yeah, that's it for me. So thank you very much. And